as the backup, just in case something goes wrong here?
Yep, I've started recording. We're good.
All right, I'm gonna hit broadcast and then I'll say we're live, I guess, once it's good. All right, and I'll keep the clock as well. Cool. All right, we're live.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start real quick then. So she wanted us to just discuss our thoughts of the organizational culture and the types of culture we've experienced in our workplace, either it being positive, negative, engaging, entertaining, etc., whatever. So I actually watched the Zappos video before this, and I have to say that my experience with organizational culture is nothing like the video whatsoever. Just because I have a fairly traditional style of work in my work life. I have a pretty decent work-life separation rather than the work-life integration that they would aim for in the video. In terms of the language being used, the company, the boss, and employees, they do use we a lot, which makes us seem more like a family unit rather than just workers. One of the rights in my work is a fairly common, just the use of raises to show promotion. We also use rights of renewal by setting up like a goal board at work, just to write down our goals and like what we're working towards type of thing. And since we are just a small company, there's not really any gossip or storytelling. So I think that aspect doesn't really exist in my job. So,
how does Jacob, if you don't mind me asking, how does your company or individuals at the company handle it when there's an employee that doesn't really mesh with the culture of the organization and their own values and they're individuals and they're not able to mesh well with the organizational culture? How do you guys handle that?
I was going to say, I'm not too sure because I'm the newest one to actually come aboard. I'm the youngest too. I work at an accounting firm. So everybody's like the next oldest is going to be like 35, I think. So I'm 25. But yeah, I guess like if that really if they didn't mesh like you're asking, like my boss would probably just sit down with them and kind of like see where they're at in life type of thing. But I don't really have an answer because I am the newest one to join.
Is that the company you're working at?
Yeah,
was. Like how many employees are there?
It's me, the CPA, and then there's like 2 accountants, and which are pretty to themselves. You know how accountants are. If they're like really just in the zone, they don't really even say morning or anything. So there's 2 accountants, 1 CPA, and then 1 other admin worker. So there's just 5 of them.
So for the most part, you would say like everyone's all on the same wavelength, like have bought into the culture, and it's like pretty transparent and apparent within the workplace. Like, hey, this is how we roll around here. Everyone jumps on board.
Yeah, no, I the lady who hired me, I waited on her forever. I was a bartender for 3 years, and I waited on her for maybe 2, and then she's like, "You should come work for me." Awesome thing, and I went and worked with her. So then I guess I fit in, so I still have the job. So.
All right.
So.
I guess I can go if you want me to.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I work for the transportation department at Boulder Valley School District in Colorado, and it's a pretty structured environment. We're actually in the process of changing our building, so we're building a brand new building. So the culture is going to change in the fact that we no longer are going to have offices. It's all an open concept, so we're all going to work kind of in a group collaboration area. And we got a new director that came in, and I think in order to make these adaptive changes for our staff, we needed a leader that was going to come in and just make these positive changes and make us feel like a team, which I don't think was the environment in the past.
Was it more like you just kind of come to work type of thing and just come home, or?
More just like, I get my job done. As long as I'm taking care of what I need to take care of, everything's fine. And with the new director that came in, it's more of a team. So
right.
We're all helping each other out. And I think by changing the environment is going to even emphasize that even more.
Right.
Where do you think the need for that change came in? Is that something that your new leader came and identified himself, or did he receive feedback from the team? Like, hey, I think we could be more successful and more cohesive working in this type of environment. And then he implemented change from there. Like, where do you think that came from, or how do you think that came about?
I don't think that came from the lower levels. I think it came from upper level leadership. That's kind of what the school districts are going towards. You know, even in the schools, they're going to open areas where the kids are collaborating in open space and doing group projects in that way. So I think it's coming from higher.
Okay, so it kind of sounds similar to this class I took on organizational innovation. Actually, there was this textbook we used, and this guy, he had this theory called evolutionary teal, and there were actually schools where the students actually chose their own curriculum, chose what they wanted to study, and they actually chose what level they were going to be at. So you could have had like someone who's supposed to be in 5th grade, and then someone who's supposed to be in 3rd grade on that same level because they're in their own path.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was Lulu, wasn't it?
Yeah, Lulu. Yep. Did you guys do that class?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting concepts, but it sounds similar to adapting and staying in tune with the needs of those in the organization.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
That's awesome. So I've been a part of Starbucks for about 10 years now. So I've bounced around from store to store to store. And although Starbucks has their own culture, the culture varies from store to store depending on the leadership that's in that store. So I've been a part of some really like negative cultures before. And I've also been a part of some amazing cultures before, where it feels like there's a lot of team synergy and everybody's getting along great. There's not a lot of gossip. We're able to get the things done that we need to get done, and we're achieving our goals. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the adaptive leadership style, where you have to create that culture where people are trusting. So you have to have people that are competent and know what they're doing, but also creating an environment where people feel comfortable to come and express their concerns or celebrate their wins, even if they're small. So that's kind of what stood out to me in this chapter, is being a part of different cultures and what really makes those cultures effective.
Would you say that the cultures that were positive, so to speak, there was a noticeable difference in the performance and the efficiency and the effectiveness of the team, like those were at a negative or kind of like a hostile environment?
Oh, absolutely. In those negative or hostile environments, it's really hard to just get the basic tasks done that we need to, or provide the customer service that we need to. But in those cultures that were really positive, where everybody was contributing and supporting each other and celebrating wins, it was so easy. We were able to get everything done that we needed to, and we were all happy to do it and help each other. So there's a huge difference between having that awesome culture and a really sucky culture.
Right. I was gonna just say like it'd be like serving, almost like serving at a restaurant, as opposed to like pooling tips for the whole restaurant or just keeping your own tips. I've worked in places where I've done both, and I've noticed that when we pool our tips, even though it doesn't always pan out to be the best situation, the flow of the restaurant is just a lot more. It's just a lot higher than just keeping your own tips, because everybody's trying to help each other out, grab this plate, grab that. So it's kind of the same tie-in concept as what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Danielle, if you don't mind me asking, just because like you work at Starbucks, like it's a huge company, and I'm sure a lot of the studies are based around like Starbucks. So obviously Starbucks overall, like corporate, has this is the culture that the company established, and like you said, working from location to location, obviously everyone interprets things differently or enforces things differently. Obviously, it's like the store's job to hold the line to make sure the store is in compliance, and putting off that vision and upholding the values of the organization. Have you ever been in a situation like running a store where you don't believe in the organizational values, and you don't necessarily agree with the way they want you to do something? And if so, how did you handle that situation? Did you just fall in suit and do it just because that's what was expected of you, or did you pretty much find a way to inspire change and implement a new process?
So it's a really hard thing for me. There's been a few situations in which I did not agree with what we were doing whatsoever. And so it was really hard for me to accept that personally. I met quite a bit with my leadership team and asked questions to try to find understanding so that there could be some sort of a buy-in for me. Because it's really hard for me to sell it to my team if I don't believe in it. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it kind of does. It does. Like you wanted to gain an understanding of why. You didn't want to just be told, like, excuse the terminology we use in the Marine Corps, like, go shut up and color. Like, you're told to do it, shut up and color. Like, you want to know the reason behind it. So that way you can explain it to those underneath you. So you're not just, like, it's not the blind leading the blind, essentially.
Yeah.
But what I ultimately was looking for is, was there ever a situation where you disagreed wholeheartedly with something you brought up and said, I'm not doing this because of X, Y, and Z, and this is how we should operate from here on out?
Yes. One of my stores that I had was in a really bad location, and we had all kinds of weird stuff going on. And so I'm sure you've all heard about the most recent bias training that we've had, but when that all came out, I was no longer at that store. So I didn't really have an opportunity to protest wholeheartedly, but I know that if I was at that store still, I would definitely have an issue. I've had some pretty serious things happen to my partners, and ultimately, I'm their leader. I'm kind of their protector. And so in order for me to make sure that they're safe and happy, that's one situation where I would have put my foot down. But I personally have not experienced that as of yet.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and jump in here, I guess. So kind of like what Jacob was saying a minute ago, so that's kind of why I asked how big his company was, is I've had, what I used to think was when I first got in aviation, I worked at smaller companies. The one was about 200 employees, and the other one was about 500 at one point, and we grew to about 1,000, we cut back down to about 500. And I always liked the small company feel, and I always thought, hey, everybody gets to know everybody treats everybody with a lot of respect, everybody's out, everybody's listening. It's real personal, everybody's families and everything else, and I always thought that was a good thing, but especially the first company I worked at, what I found out was it was a real small town, and there wasn't a whole lot of diversity. It was even predominantly white, and I kind of mentioned this in all my discussions with folks, but when I actually went to Boeing then, I became a part of a huge corporation and got, in front of all this other diversity and people from different backgrounds and different cities and everything else. It got to be where I noticed that diversity was really a good aspect for everything, where I used to think that, hey, getting to know everybody and having that real tight-knit thing was good, but sometimes you need those unique experiences brought in, and I realized it's actually good to be part of a big corporation. And then another thing I noticed too is, like, from Boeing's standpoint, it's like there's a big push to, bring women along, kind of like the gender gap that was in 10 we talked about. And like one of our issues is like bringing female engineers in, like University of Missouri Rolla, one of the big engineering schools around here, like 77% male as far as enrollment. And it's like, how are you going to get female from an engineering background when your biggest engineering school around is 77% male? And it's one of those things we just got to overcome, and it's really related, I thought, to the material this week.
Awesome. You want to jump in, Taylor?
Yeah, absolutely. Apologize for my tardiness, by the way. I was downtown and kind of underestimated my time I thought that it would take to get home. But anyways, so I guess we're talking about cultures that we've experienced in different organizations, I assume. Oh, okay. So Yeah, I mean, like basically what I wrote about for my discussion post, where the topic was similar, was like I've worked for 2 different companies, or I've worked at a lot of different places. I've worked at companies that are very progressive in terms of their culture and stuff like that, and I've worked at companies that are kind of old school, old fashioned types of hierarchies and things of that nature. And one of the basically like the comparison that I made in my discussion board post was I worked at Starbucks previous to the job that I'm at now, and simultaneously working at Starbucks, I was also working at CarMax as a second job, just trying to make some extra money on the side doing car sales. And there was like definitely a distinct difference between those 2 companies, where like Starbucks is, they're very inclusive. The type of hierarchy is kind of like it's very flat. There's not a huge distance between leaders and entry level employees, stuff like that. One great example that I used was like language, which is just the fact that Starbucks calls all their employees partners. Is very inclusive, and that language is heard throughout the entire company. It's very important to them. CarMax, on the other hand, was like stark contrast. They're kind of, even though they're a newer company, and they're doing really well as a newer company, they also, they're still in the business of selling cars, which has this just old fashioned kind of top down sort of hierarchy element to it. And there's a very far distance between leaders and entry level employees. And so I use the example of a language difference there between the language difference at Starbucks. Whereas like at CarMax, you're going to see more of the you guys do this, you are this, and this. There's like I'm in charge of this, I'm in charge of you guys, and so on and so forth. And like I'm here to step in whenever you guys need it, type of deal. Which is the case with any leader, but it's like I said, the distance is definitely there and it's recognizable. And not to say that that's a bad thing either, particularly for what the kind of business that they're in. But it was a recognizable difference and something that my mind immediately drew to whenever we went through this chapter.
I know those are like 2 like completely different jobs, obviously. But did you notice like one of the 2 jobs that you just thrived at because one was inclusive and one was exclusive?
That's a great question. Not necessarily. I think I kind of fit in with both. Just because I'm kind of I'm able to adapt a little bit. I'm pretty flexible with that kind of thing. I liked both companies. I think they're both really good places. I will say I probably was maybe more so because I did spend more time at Starbucks, which is a variable. But I was on a track to gaining a leadership position. Well, I wasn't leadership. I mean, I was a shift manager at Starbucks, so I had taken a step up from like an entry level position already. But I was on like a faster track towards leadership there than CarMax. But I also spent, like I said, I spent little time at CarMax, maybe 9 months, 8 months. So.
Great.
All right. Well, yeah. As we're coming towards the end of our time, I guess I'll just close it out. I'll try to keep it brief. As you probably could guess, I'm going to talk about the organization that I'm currently part of, the Marine Corps. I think it's a super great example for organizational culture. Like it has a super strong culture. It's extremely, you're either part of the in-group or you're part of the out-group. So I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that's kind of like a mystery that most people don't really know about. One thing that I found interesting, like you said, Danielle, was similarly to the Marine Corps, there's that overall organizational culture that each unit that you go to, it's going to be different depending on your commanding officer, your senior enlisted advisors, and how they're interpreting and enforcing the culture amongst everybody. Interesting enough, in the Marine Corps, if you do not adapt to the culture, you can actually get administratively separated for something that they call failure to adapt. Meaning like you literally cannot adapt to the organizational culture, you are not a good fit, and you could actually be kicked out of the people for that. So just like an interesting little tidbit. So I would say, talking about bringing the term culture shock in. It could definitely be a culture shock for people when they come to an organization and it's not what they expected it to be, or they didn't do their homework before, or they were lied to and told it's going to be like this, but it's really like this. So a culture shock could also lead to someone being non-compliant and not able to assimilate into the organizational culture. With the elements of organizational culture, assumptions, values, and symbols, I'd say some assumptions upon entering in is like it's the military, it's a rigid hierarchy. Marines are supposed to be mentally and physically fit. You're supposed to carry yourself in a certain way to gain respect for the organization and make a good name for the organization. You're supposed to be tough. And then you have that expectation or that assumption that you're going to have that brotherhood and sisterhood for a lifetime. The organizational values, Marine Corps states the organizational values, honor, courage, and commitment. That's like drilled from day one when you go to boot camp and all that. There's tons of organizational symbols and artifacts and stuff like that. We've got specific language. We address individuals by their rank. We have our own like acronyms, like tons of acronyms, slang, terminology that like you probably think we were speaking a different language if you heard a bunch of Marines talking. Not to mention we curse a lot, but there's Marine Corps doctrine which says this is how we do things. It examines the past and creates that historical trend. This is how we did things. This is how we were successful, and this is how we're going to operate moving forward to accomplish our mission. We have uniforms. We have the history of those that came before us and heroes. We do things, celebrate the birthdays, traditional type of things every year. On the Marine Corps birthday, we have a big birthday ball celebration. We do things like nights, which are our naval tradition and stuff. It's traditional dinner and stuff like that. So that's really as far as I'm going to go into. I can talk all day about the organizational culture in the Marine Corps, but I think like there's a very strong culture, and it's frowned upon to not comply. It's expected that you put your own personal values and everything aside, and you represent the Marine Corps 24/7 in everything that you do. So
yeah, I will say there's it's definitely a great example of organizational culture. I definitely agree with you there. I mean, it's just like one of those things where, like, in my mind, I mean, it's almost compared to like a fraternity. Like, it really is like a brotherhood. Those types of just like systematic like things that you do that people before you've done and what they will continue to do, and stuff that's just set so firmly in stone that it's just so tight knit and stuff like that. So it makes sense.
All right. And does anyone want to add anything else up before we come to close today?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Good.
All righty. Well, it's been good. Until next week.
Guys, have a good night.
Long.
Yeah, I killed the. We're off air now, so.
Cool beans.
Cool. Anyone else have anything?
Nope. Same time Sunday.
Yeah, like I was telling Brian earlier, I'm not gonna go to Vegas Sunday. I'm gonna actually be at a wedding at this time in Tennessee. So, I'll talk to the professors